Welcome to Cover Book Beat. I'm your host, Roger Nichols. One of the great delights in interviewing authors is reading the first work of what I consider to be a major new talent. And it's even better if it's by someone from your hometown. That's just what we have today. Our guest is from the Dalles, Oregon. His name is Jeff Stewart. And to clarify for local residents, this is not the sculptor Jeff Stewart who carved the wooden bears at the library. This is the Jeff Stewart who was a college champion on Jeopardy in 1994 and is of the Stewart Radiator family group. His book is titled Living, with a subtitle which we'll reveal shortly. It is flat out one of the best books I have read in years, with a unique style and an opening that first comforts you and then grabs you in the heart. We are very pleased to welcome Jeff Stewart.
Thank you so much for having me, Roger.
Before we dive into the book itself, I want to do a little bit of background on you personally. Born and raised in the Dalles, as we mentioned, you're probably best known for being on Jeopardy, which you won the college championship and got second place in the Tournament of Champions. And you're also something of a polymath, a word we don't hear a lot of anymore. A trained molecular biologist, healthcare consultant, a scientist, inventor, award-winning playwright, trivia expert, and father of 7, all of which makes you uniquely qualified to write this book. There is a unique structure to the book that includes 101 inspirations, and Inspiration 101 is the first thing in the book, and it's a comforting thought, which I will read very quickly. Inspiration 101, you'll feel better in the morning. When you are filled with despair, get some sleep. I'm not saying you feel all better in the morning, but you will feel better. Which is a bit of a cushion before we get to the first line of the book, which I'll ask you to read.
Sure. So the first chapter is called A Good Way to Get Bad News, July 11th, 2022. This morning I tried to donate my kidney. This afternoon, the transplant team told me I can't. I have cancer.
What a blow, particularly at a time when you are trying to help somebody medically. But there's a silver lining in that as well, isn't there?
Indeed, the cancer that I have, so I had 2 tumors. One was in one of my kidneys, in fact. The other one was in my stomach. And I say was because I've had surgery since. We're still treating those, so we don't know that they're completely gone. But those cancers kill and are extraordinarily lethal because they're undetected. My cancers had no symptoms. In fact, my stomach cancer is extraordinarily hard to find because I also had gastric bypass years ago. And the cancer that I have, or had at least, in my stomach was in the bypassed part of my stomach. So no symptoms, no eating disorder issues where I couldn't swallow, no pain, and a rather lethal cancer. Those things don't mix well. So if the cancer spreads of the type that I have in my stomach, at least, the 5-year survival is 0.
Yeah.
If it spreads, it's lethal.
Yeah.
So it was beyond belief lucky to have spotted these early.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings us to the subtitle of the book, which I kind of held out a moment because I wanted to give that moment a surprise. It's called Inspiration from a Father with Cancer. So it's an amazing design for the book. I don't think I've ever seen anything like it. It's a braided structure. So you've got the 101 inspirations. You've got your narrative of the progress with the cancer. You've got portions where you speak actually directly to your descendants using the, you this and you that. And you have this conversation, question and answer session with your son-in-law, all braided through this, which makes for quick little chapters. It's a fast read. I read it in 2 sessions, and it would have been 1 except I had company. So I have to ask about the playwright part of it, because obviously written before. This is not a first novel. I mean, I guess it is, but it's the first book you've written before, and you've got the chops for it. What kind of plays did you write?
So I wrote some short plays and then a 1-act play. The 2 short plays were produced and in kind of like small play contests in New Mexico and in San Pedro, which I gather is part of Los Angeles. I wasn't able to go out to see that one, but those are the ones that I did. They tended to be more science fiction-y kind of works.
Oh, great. Well, I was a science fiction fan myself. We can talk about that at some point. But
Love it.
the book, it's a matter of fact, when we corresponded prior to this, and I said that we have an enormous amount of similarities. One of the things that we both have had stomach bypass, and we both use a CPAP machine because of sleep apnea. We both tried out for Teen Jeopardy. Neither one of us got it. You got it later in college. And one of your prizes for the Jeopardy was a vehicle. And I remember going down to Ernest Motors, where they courtesy delivered it to you in the Dalles. I think I was working at that time for the old Weekly Reminder, but I remember that it was pretty a big occasion at the time. So I'm sure you don't still have that vehicle, but I bet you it was amazing to have that.
I don't. It was the only new vehicle I've owned before or since. I am very, very cheap. So that's it. But it was so nice. I mean, at that point, I had two kids, and one college Jeopardy, which was money we needed and made life possible. And like I said, the only new vehicle we've ever owned. So that was a huge blessing. Yeah. It really was.
Indeed, and some nice cash money to it, and again, more cash next year when. I hate to say this, but as I read this, you lost by $1 from the Tournament of Champions.
I did. On the tournament, there were players who were better and faster than I was, but I very luckily skated by two of the fastest players, the two fastest players I've ever played. And then in the finals, I dominated in both games. I was just faster than my opponents, but I didn't know as much as my opponents, and so I bet it all on Final Jeopardy both days and got it wrong one of the days and lost by $1. But that's the game.
And this is interesting to me that you were on a trivia team in college. I didn't know there was such a thing. Of course, my college days are half a century in the past, so they didn't have such things when I was going through. But again, we're trivia fans, and I have competed in trivia tournaments locally. And just won one here last week. So that's
congrats.
Yeah, thank you. It was a team effort, but it was fascinating. So I have to ask, how difficult was it for you to be as open as you are in this book?
Well, I didn't see any point in not being open, because the whole point of what I thought, okay, once my cancer became more than just okay, I'm probably going to be cured from surgery, into being, oh, this is actually pretty serious, to where I do have, and my prognosis still is, a 50% chance of a long and full life and a 50% chance of I could be dead in 5 months. And I just have to live with that for a couple of years until I'm past the danger zone. So in thinking that, it really changed my perspective on life, as you can imagine. As you mentioned, I have 7 kids. I do want to be there to mentor them and help them through the hard parts of life, or help them avoid the hard parts of life. But maybe I won't be there. Maybe I won't be there, Roger. So that was the real push for me to feel it was what I really needed to do, is get down those kind of mental tools that I've developed over the years, or picked up over the years, and figure out a way that it would just stick in their minds, be there so that they could read them and they could look back on those things. And that was for me the part of the book that I really wanted to get out there and get for them. The book for them, really. Yeah. In basically blogging what was going on with my cancer, I found something else that I can't say I really expected, Roger. Is I got feedback from people that when they were hearing my story, it made it easier for them to understand their parents who had cancer, or their grandparents who had cancer, and just didn't know how to talk about it or want to talk about it. It made it, and then even as time progressed, I had people that just got diagnoses and had told essentially nobody about it, and they were telling me, and they're so scared. They're so scared. And what makes cancer less scary for me, I think, is I'm kind of immersed in the field. I know the things to be scared about. I know the things not to be scared about. And the vocabulary is extraordinarily dense and hard to understand, but that's my job. My job is to understand these things. That's what I do for a living. So going and trying to figure that all out, I can do. And I I can't say for sure I'm not as scared as other people are, but it sure feels that way. And when people read it, I think that they find themselves to be less scared, even if it's not the same kind of cancer, even if it's not the same kind of disease that they're facing, even if it's just something else that they're facing that's hard. It makes it all a little bit more, I wouldn't say comforting, but not quite so frightening. And that seemed important.
Well, I hate to use the word inspiring because you used inspirations all through that, but it seems unnatural that one of the things that you're doing is you're giving a ton of advice. And in fact, your dedication mentions to your grandchildren, though I may not be there to give it to you otherwise, which is, I think, is a really emotional piece to that. But not only that, but a narrative of what's going on. And it's so valuable to leave that, even if you're there to read it to them as grandkids. Not only for that, but for everybody else that wants to read this. And I highly recommend it. I believe it's coming out May 15th as we record this.
May 15th, it'll be out. Yeah, that's correct. So May 15th, and the book is Living, Inspiration from a Father with Cancer. It'll be out on Amazon, of course, and then you should be able to get it through any bookstore also.
I suspect Clint's will have a few copies, yeah.
One hopes.
Yeah. Well, for those who don't know, that's our local bookstore, since we both come from the same town. I was going through, and I take notes as I read, and there's some really cool stuff in here, and I want to quote some of it to you and get some reactions to you. There's actually some dark humor in there, because one of the things you talk about is a great concept is Schrodinger's cancer. From the famous thought experiment about Schrodinger's cat. Until you open the box, you don't know if it's alive or dead. Until you get a definitive diagnosis, you have no clue where your future is. I thought that was clever and creative, so I really compliment you on that particular thought.
Sure feels like me. I feel like Schrodinger's cat.
Yeah.
And I don't know what will happen when the box is open. I just don't. So it makes me live in I'm sure that many of us, I know I did. I bet you did. I bet most of the people listening do. You live in kind of like a 5-year increment, maybe a 10-year increment of like, maybe I care about what I'm doing today, but what I'm really thinking about is like, what do I have to do to make life better, meaningful in 5 years? Yeah. But that 5-year middle ground is gone for me. It's just gone. I have 5 months and I have 50 years. I have those two things, and I've got to make things work out for both of those things, and forget 5 years. 5 years, just, it doesn't exist.
I have to ask your family reaction to this, both the news and your book.
I mean, at first, it would be as you would expect. I mean, no one ever wants to have a cancer diagnosis. No one ever wants to have a cancer diagnosis in the family. So there's that. And then the natural reaction. I see this a lot. I think we've all seen a lot. I've done it, so I understand. There is the reaction of trying to say, well, just keep up the good attitude. It's all going to be fine. You're going to fight that cancer and you're going to beat it. But that puts actually a lot of pressure on people, both to be the prayer warrior, to find something to tell them the right food to eat, to keep up an attitude that's really hard to keep up. And that energy, sometimes, it feels to me, gets a little misspent. When that's not what's needed. The chemotherapy is fighting the cancer. The radiation's fighting the cancer. And if we can spend our time worrying about the things as cancer patients and as families, about the things that we must do, that only we can do, then it puts our priorities in the right place. Only I can be the father reading to my 12-year-old daughter.
Exactly.
In whatever time I have left. And I should be doing that instead of other things that just won't matter.
Exactly. You make the point, and my wife absolutely loved it when I read this part about you hate seeing somebody, the fight with cancer, the battle with cancer, the war with cancer, etc. As you point out, you're not fighting, it's your body that's doing that. Yeah. And it's a bad simile.
And I might... Yeah, and think about the people that feel as though they've lost their battle with cancer. They haven't lost their battle with cancer. They haven't. That wasn't the fight. It's not the fight of the person. We're the battlefield. We're the field on which the war happens and the fight happens. And yeah, we're interested in the outcome. I don't mean to say we aren't interested in the outcome.
Yeah.
We have vested interest, but it's a misplaced energy, I feel. And for me, and maybe not for everyone, but for me, it's a misplaced energy to be fighting. I mean, if you want to fight cancer, take your pills on time, show up for your chemo, don't listen to nonsense. I mean, that's what you have to do to give yourself the best chance by all the evidence we know.
Yeah, absolutely. Boy, there's so much stuff to talk about here. There's some great advice in this, and one of the big advice pieces that I really was attracted to is walk away from liars and don't. You read the most important single thing we do to learn these days is to walk away from bad sources. Before trusting any article, any videos, or talking heads, conduct a background check. That's so important these days. And you know as well as I that the internet has made us all listen to little echo chambers and reinforce everything we had and not listen to other viewpoints. So I'm really glad you put that advice for your kids, grandkids, and beyond, because it's absolutely necessary at this point. Wow. Also, I had one that was I thought was a bit humorous, maybe wasn't intentional, but I got kind of an odd click out of it. You say one of the places where you address them to your kids, you say physically attractive people aren't always taken seriously. Just ask your mother, which I loved. But the next line is the beautiful attract the shallow, which I don't think happened in this case, but might have caused people to assume that. So I just thought that was kind of cute as an oddball take on that sentence.
It's a little funny. Yeah, my wife is constantly underestimated, and she's been on Jeopardy. She will appear and probably will have appeared by the time this comes out on the game show The Weakest Link. Can't tell you how she did,
Okay.
but she plays constantly. And there's a secret trivia fight club that if you kind of like look up Trivia Fight Club or something like that and see some New York Times article, that's it. She's in the top ranks of those and is constantly in the top part of the top ranks. She's extraordinarily good. So no, I mean, I'm happy that she is very attractive and young looking, but that's not, it's the fact that it was just so easy to talk to her and just to have that kind of rapport. That was more important. That was the important thing for us.
Well, I think trivia has been very, very good to your family. Isn't that where you met? Was in college trivia?
It is. Yeah, we were on the college trivia team together. There's a funny story there on top of just having kind of been on the trivia teams together. After we left, so this is maybe a year or two after, we played our old trivia team, which was the Brigham Young University trivia team. Mm-hmm. We played them in a tournament at nationals and got beaten by Earl and Earl's roommate. How the heck do we get beaten by Earl and Earl's roommate? Earl's roommate was this guy called Ken.
Again, I think I know which Ken you're talking. Jennings. Yes.
Correct. That was Ken Jennings. Earl's roommate was Ken Jennings, and that he was on the team just after we left.
Wow. So obviously, there's a great history there, and a great history for your family. I enjoyed the talks with your son-in-law interspersed with that, because that lets you ask questions that the reader might ask and answer that. Was that one conversation or a bunch of them?
It was one long conversation, in fact. Yeah. He wanted, so, as you said, we have a son-in-law. One of our children is married, hopefully more later, but right now one child is married. And our son-in-law, Lane, is, he wanted to kind of capture my story in case things turned lethal. And so he did. And that was a blessing. But once that was done, then it was like, well, there are parts of this that would be interesting, maybe flesh them out a bit and clean them up. But they would tell a story in there, which I don't. It's been an interesting life, Roger. It really has. It's from going from being on Jeopardy to having a really very truly difficult time when I was in grad school through depression, and then coming out of depression, working at Los Alamos National Laboratory, a nuclear weapons lab, on things like the viruses that later became important in pandemics, and to working in biotech finance, and having my work taught in business schools and being used on Wall Street, to now working where I design the patient programs that you or I might use to be able to get your drugs for cheap. That's the work I do, and it's been a delight. And getting part of that out there is, I hope, an interesting story just by itself.
I think one of the things that I learned that I did not know, as you talk about the high price of drugs, is from a factor that most of us aren't aware of.
Oh yeah.
Can you share that?
So sure. I mentioned one of them, which is these copay cards that will give. That's usually the number 2 price, but the number 1 single thing that is the highest line item is not the sales force. It is not marketing. It is not the sales and general administration. It's definitely not cost of goods sold, because the cost of goods sold very, very cheap. It is a big pile of money that is paid from a pharma company to your and my insurance companies to make sure that they put the drug on formulary with as few restrictions as possible. Yeah. That thing can be buy 2, get 1 free, pretty typical. Buy 1, get 1 free in competitive classes. And depending on the insurance company, they're either sharing that with the employers and the patients and lowering your costs, like they're good negotiators, which is great for you and me, or not so much. And it's just contributing to their profits. And they're extraordinarily profitable. Yes.
Well, I don't think any comment about lawyers and insurance companies is probably appropriate on my part, but we'll think about that for a little bit. What kind? I started to ask you about reaction from your kids to this.
Yeah. And I skipped over it a little bit there. So the reactions first subdued, as you might expect. A little bit somber. Some kids are joking openly. They bought me a Breaking Bad hat, and got it around here somewhere. And which looks a little ridiculous on me, but face it, Walter White looked a little ridiculous with it too. So there's a little bit of the gallows humor going on, and but I'm also, the one thing I really didn't want them to think was that I was hiding something from them and have them worry that it was maybe worse than it was. Okay. So I have shared basically everything about it. And of course in the book there's everything, but it's that they would not. They know how serious it is. But they also know when there's good news that it really is good news, and it's not just the Band-Aid on top of it, on top of a gaping wound. It's not. So it's they know the good and the bad, but I just don't know how else to soften the blow without making the blow something that you're just constantly worrying that it's going to hit you, because you're not being told the truth.
Yeah. So where do you stand now? Because this happened very quickly. This was last July, and it's April. It's less than a year. My understanding is you're through some of the treatment. Is that correct?
So I am either done with all my treatment and I will live a normal life. So I went through oral chemo with infused chemo, and then I went through radiation and oral chemo together as combination. I got done with the second part of that. And surgery. I had surgery before any of this too. That removed the bulk of the tumors for both of them. So that's what I've had, and that is the single best shot. There is nothing else that could plausibly cure me. Not now, not in the horizon. So that's it. If I now see no spread of the cancer for the next 2 years, like I said, I'm cured. It's either gone now or it's not. And if it's not, then progression is lethality once it progresses is, as I said, a matter of months. So we just have to watch for a couple of years, and no news is good news.
Exactly. How often do you check up at this point?
Every 4 months, roughly, at least for the first year. I have the first baseline where they kind of start the clock. Check scan will be in 2 weeks.
Okay, you're right. What do you want the other people who are not your family that are reading the book to take away from it?
There are so many things that will make life a little bit easier for you through hard times, or times that you could avoid the hard times. I put those in there for my kids because I really, really love them and I really wanted them to know this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I put every piece that I could into that. And it's asking a lot of a book to make cancer worth it, but I'm trying my very best. I will try to make whatever's going on with me worth it to you as a reader. If you read it, you will walk away, I hope, with something that you can use in your life right now, and maybe be inspired so that if you do get cancer yourself, or you have someone else with cancer, that it's just not quite so dark. It doesn't have to be quite that dark. Knowing is better, and I do my best to use every bit of my molecular biology and my work in healthcare to make it understandable. I mean, I have to understand it, so I try to translate in ways that help you to understand it. That's what you get. That's what you get out of the book, and hopefully a few laughs and cries along the way.
And I can't recommend it highly enough. Let's mention your website.
So I'm just on Facebook, but if you try to look up Jeffrey Stewart, you'll probably get there. If you want to email me, I've just set up a Gmail account at author Jeffrey, Jeffrey, Stewart, Stewart at gmail.com. And once I get then I'll figure out what I'm doing. Obviously, I don't know how long I'm going to be actively curating anything. So it's, if I don't respond, well,
that's so it goes. I want to say in conclusion, I had something pulled up aside that I thought was really cool. And of course, I'm scrolling down through my notes to find it very quickly. You write this. You said, I've been gifted the opportunity to share my cancer experience with others. They're reaching out. What a blessing it is to hold another's horrors for them. That's powerful stuff. And I have to say, you've been holding our horrors for us, and we are grateful.
Thank you.
So, thanks so much for being with us today and providing one of the best reads I've had in a long time. Go out and buy multiple copies, give them to all your friends, and we wish you all the best in your health.
Thank you so much, Roger. Thank you for having me. It's been a real pleasure.